Hello and welcome to this video edition of Technomicon Media. This is Matthew, and this week's Game Tech article is looking at Final Fantasy XIV, the Synthesis Guide. Of course, the biggest thing about synthesis is having the tools. The main reason for this is that equipping a specific tool actually makes you become that specific class. In the case of this example, which is a carpenter, by equipping the saw, you become a carpenter, and likewise, if you were to change tools to, say, the armorer's doming hammer, equipping the offhand there, you become an armorer. And I think you'll take note that most of my gear is what's called red or broken, and the reason for that is broken gear has no impact on synthesis except for the tools, which is it's kind of odd, and players abuse that a little bit, but it's just the way it is. So for new crafters out there, keep that in mind, that the only thing that really matters in terms of keeping your equipment, in good durability is the tools that you're utilizing. Here I'm going through an example of how to change stats without having to do what's called point allocation. I'll give you an example to go from minimum of one stat to more or less what's considered maximum or the cap. Takes about a day, and what I tend to do with synthesis is the main crafts that I focus on, there's about 3 or 4 stats associated to that, which I go into specifics in the article, but what I do is I keep those at about 120, and what I use is what are called stat swaps, what are shown here, and I'm able to increase various stats by merely swapping them using these traits which are purchased through the Disciples of Wars and Disciple of Magic classes. And those work out pretty well, utilizing both the equipable rings and stat swaps. Seems to work very well. My best recommendation for newer crafters is simply to keep all of your stats balanced if you're not quite sure what your focus is going to be on. Using stat swaps and rings should make up a considerable amount of the difference. Here we have an example of a carpentry grind at rank 33 performing a rank 40 carpentry grind of U half masks. This is probably higher than I normally would grind just because it was pretty difficult. I liked this example though because it showed how effective Hands of the Gods is. Hands of the Gods is an alchemy ability that requires completion of the rank 36 alchemy class quest, as well as purchasing the ability for 12,000 alchemist marks. The nice thing that you'll see in this demonstration is that this attempt at a UMass, which was successful, would have been a botch if not for Hands of the Gods. And I have found that to be true for many, many crafts that I've performed, and pretty much used Hand of the Gods in every grind that I do now, including the production of finish items. And the real exception to using Hands of the Gods is I typically will not use it on low-level craft parts. So as you can see at the tail end of this grind, I'm sitting at 8 durability with a ice unstable, which is pretty much certain botch death for a synthesis, but I was able to pull it off by utilizing Hand of the Gods to pretty much freeze the durability. Another ability that I make mention of in this week's Game Tech article is the ability called Clean Slate. Clean Slate is another mark purchased ability from, this time, the Leatherworkers Guild. This requires 12,000 leatherworking marks as well as completion of the rank 36 Leatherworkers quest. What Clean Slate does is it basically, when it works, and I will make mention that it often does not work, so take it with a grain of salt, but when Clean Slate does work, it resets your progress bar back down to 0, but it maintains the quality of whatever point you've decided to reset it at. In this case, it was in the mid 450s when I activated Clean Slate. Now, to back up a little, the main reason I use Clean Slate is to produce high quality parts and materials. In this example, I was making cotton yarn and used two 2 cotton balls plus 3s for this attempt. The reason I always go with +3 materials when I'm doing clean slates is that you get a huge boost in your starting durability, which you're actually going to need once you activate clean slate and have to pretty much redo the synthesis from scratch. But the catch being that it's much less stable, and you're going to lose a fair bit of durability on bold fails. Over the course of the article, I make substantial mention to HQing materials and parts and the relationship between quality and the outcome. I have done plenty of clean slates that were successful where the product was a normal quality item and it was fairly irritating to progress to, say, 650 quality and still get an NQ item. In this example, I reached 598 quality at the end of the clean slate attempt, and I luckily got a +2 out of it, which was pretty nice. But at least it gives you an example of under the best circumstances what clean slate can produce in terms of ending quality and not necessarily, the ending HQ product. Abilities like Clean Slate and Hands of the Gods are purchased from guild vendors. These guild mark vendors only accept what are called guild marks, and guild marks are attainable via completion of the rank-based class quest for the corresponding guild, as well as the completion of leave quests, which have a random chance to award marks. Here we have the goldsmithing vendor and the various training manuals and abilities that the goldsmithing vendor sells. What you see here in yellow are things that I've already purchased. The difference between training manuals and equipable abilities from the guild mark vendors is, think of the training manuals as passive abilities that allow players to craft with more ease whenever they're producing something that requires a book, versus these equipable abilities, which I've shown earlier, that are activated throughout the course of the synthesis process. An example of how a training manual comes into play in terms of synthesis is, take for example smelting training, which basically adds a tremendous amount of ease of synthesis for things like nugget production as well as ingot production, which is produced by both blacksmiths and goldsmiths. All of the various abilities in terms of training manuals as well as activated synthesis abilities can be viewed via the main menu. Here you can see in general attributes under key items is where all the training manuals are kept for your records in terms of being able to visually see which books you have acquired and what each of the books do. As far as abilities that are utilized during the synthesis, those are viewed under actions and traits. And each of the classes has a set of abilities that are easily viewed via a drop-down, which you can select various crafting classes. And the thing that's important to note is that each of the abilities learned from one craft is completely usable from any other craft. Here's an example of production of an item that will be HQ'd using solely touch-up. That's actually what I found is the primary way to produce high-quality finished items is through touch-up, and this is true for both materials that are NQ, like in this example, as well as items produced using a mixture of normal quality and high-quality items, or purely high-quality items. So in this example, I start with a baseline of roughly 104 durability, and I think pretty close to base quality. And over the course of using my normal array of crafting abilities, in this example I used ingenuity, manipulation, immersion, Hands of the Gods, and Preserve. This synthesis was being produced as a rank 50 goldsmith, and I believe the class-based rank of Electromarines is around 42, so I'm roughly 8 ranks up on this one. And this, of course, is another great example of using Hand of the Gods to progress through a synthesis without losing durability. And the main reason for wanting to use Hand of the Gods in terms of finished items is that the more durability you're left over with at the end of the synthesis, the more attempts at touching up you'll have. Now, I've produced my fair share of +2 and +3 items, most of the time utilizing a mixed bag of various types of HQ materials. And in this example, I just wanted to show how an HQ can occur out of normal quality materials via touch-up. But from experience, the majority of +2 and +3 items I've produced have occurred solely and exclusively during the touch-up process, going from normal quality to +1, or jumping from +1 to +2, or even jumping, multiple quality ranks, all over the course of the touch-up process. And this concludes this video edition of Technomicon Media's look at Final Fantasy XIV, the Synthesis Guide. For the full article, please visit us at www.technomicon.com, and thanks for watching.